we've done a lot of conversation so far about water, and now I'd like to switch and focus on the things living in the water. Zach Feiner with the Wisconsin DNR joining us now to focus on fish, right? The fisheries that we have in Wisconsin. Our lakes, our rivers, our creeks, even the smallest streams have little fish living inside of them. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the history and the current status of how big that fishing culture is here in Wisconsin?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Wisconsin fishing goes back to before Wisconsin was a state, right? Like, even when you think about up in the northern part of the state, we have all of the different Native American tribes that have traditions and relationships with our fish going back thousands of years. And then our recreational fisheries are incredibly important to the state. They bring in $1 million of tourism, and we see a lot of folks coming from all over the country. Our fisheries are really nationally recognized as a really important place for people to come and enjoy our natural resources. And we are nationally recognized, I mean, different trout streams, going to Sturgeon Bay, just being out on the lakes and being able to get some perch and ice fishing. There are all these different outlets. How are you seeing a change in things? I know you've done a good deal of research. Can you talk a little bit about how the climate is impacting what's going on in the water? Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big ways we see how climate change is influencing fisheries in Wisconsin is it's really warming up our waters. And a lot of the hallmark species that people like to fish for in Wisconsin, like walleye, brook trout, cisco, other species like that, are cold water or cool water species, which means they need cold or cool water to survive and complete their life cycle. And they also need long winters, and those seasonal aspects are really important. So as climate change warms up waters and messes up our seasons, it reduces their ability to thrive. And what we're seeing is a shift away from those cool water species and toward warm water species like bass and bluegill and other species like that.
Is that impacting the fishing seasons that the DNR puts out together, and then also, I guess, the stocking? Because I know some of the lakes are stocked with fish. Are those all being connected with how the temperatures are changing?
Absolutely. So as the waters are warming up, for example, we're seeing less walleye survival and recruitment. So that's the number of baby fish that survive. And so we've increased walleye stocking. And what we're actually seeing in a lot of places is that climate change is starting to outstrip our ability to actually resist it in a lot of areas, right? So we're doing a lot of stocking and a lot of harvest management to try and resist climate change. But in places where climate change has become so pervasive and so strong that our ability to resist it is reduced, we can start thinking about maybe doing other things, maybe managing warm water species and trying to promote other fisheries in those places to still have places for people to go and fish.
And this ripples out to the economic impacts of fishing, but also folks eating, those tribes up north that have a history in fishing.
Absolutely.
How does that ripple out even into other species within the water? We're looking at different plants or those animals that live around our lakes and streams. When we see the change in the fish, or the change in the species of fish that are in that waterway, does that have ripple effects outside of the water?
Yeah, absolutely. You can think about, these aquatic ecosystems are related to the terrestrial ecosystems around them, right? So the types of fish that are available, not just to anglers, but to other animals that might feed on fish, or which species of fish are there to, consume insects and other species that are in the water, are really important for keeping those linkages in place. And as those linkages start to break down, you can see changes in, for example, water quality. Like if you don't have the predatory species of fish that are eating maybe zooplankton and other species, you can actually see increases in algal blooms, for example. So all of that's related, and climate change can have these kind of cascading effects on lakes and streams in that way.
And even if it's just a few degree change, because that's the feedback we get from people a lot, it's only a degree or two warmer than average. It's not that big of a deal, but it has bigger consequences when a whole season or a whole year ends up above average. And these fish, we were talking about spawning season, they're very sensitive to those temperature changes, right?
Exactly. It can be a few degrees difference one way or another, and it completely changes by an order of magnitude of a month or even a couple of months when those fish spawn. And that can have really significant impacts on how many of those baby fish then survive. If they hatch when it's too early and too cold, or if they hatch when it's too late and there's not enough food around, they won't survive. And those small changes, even though they seem like a few degrees, can lead to big changes in habitat too. So for example, there's a study that some folks at the Wisconsin DNR did that actually showed that a couple changes increase in trout or stream temperatures can lead to a 2/3 decrease in trout habitat availability. So a small change means everything to some of these species.
It's a huge difference, absolutely.
Exactly.
From a science standpoint, you were talking about the resisting climate change. Are you still in that phase, or are we starting to pivot to more of a place where we've got to just adjust. We've got to adapt to how things are changing, or are we still trying to combat and avoid it?
Yeah, right now we're really focused on resistance, and that nomenclature comes from this idea of this RAD framework, which is either you can resist a big change, you can accept a big change, or you can try and direct that change to a new place that's maybe more beneficial. And right now we were really focused on resistance and trying to resist climate change and keep things the way they are. But as climate change overtakes our ability to resist it in some places, as I mentioned, that's where we can start thinking about maybe accepting some change. Maybe that's more bluegill and bass, which are still a lot of fun to catch and a lot of really good to eat. And that can be a viable situation or strategy in a few of the other places.
For folks that are concerned directly about fish, whether they are someone who enjoys fishermen or fishing, or if they're just someone who likes to sit out on the lake and watch the ripples on the water every once in a while, is there anything you would recommend them doing or being conscious and aware of moving forward?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big things is just thinking about what you can do on your local lake. Sometimes you can do these habitat projects that can improve habitat and keep some of these fish species around. I mean, another thing on the landscape level is maybe being flexible. Maybe you won't be able to fish for walleye in the lake in your backyard, but there are places where walleye are going to continue to thrive in Wisconsin. We're not talking about the end of walleye, for example. So, being flexible and being able to take advantage of those new opportunities as they arise, I think is going to be really important as we move forward.
Wonderful. I think this is another conversation that just is going to have to continue on as things do change, and we learn to hopefully continue to resist, but potentially adapt in the future. We'll see.
Absolutely.
We'll see. Zach, thank you so much for your time this morning. We'll be right back.